Welcome to Topic 3, which describes the entire benchmarking mission with all tasks for you as an assessor in each phase. Prior to benchmarking, the benchmarking team undergoes preparatory activities, which involve briefing and conducting virtual meetings and sessions. The team virtually gathers to introduce themselves and clarify their roles and responsibilities. The methodology used in benchmarking is reviewed and refreshed. You will be given a refresher on both the GBT and the CGBT and will receive a recap of the tasks assigned to you and the associated responsibilities. You will also receive some background information on the regulatory authority to be benchmarked. In case of remote benchmarking, this type of virtual briefings will also be used in place of the on-site preparatory meetings. Remember, attending to preparatory meetings is mandatory as they ensure that the benchmarking team is well prepared and aligned with the benchmarking objectives and methodologies. Independently on whether the benchmarking is conducted remotely or in person, a desk-based review phase of the data provided by the regulatory authority will be needed to prepare the mission properly. The desk-based review focuses on the verified self-assessment and is conducted by the WHO team members in the 2 weeks preceding the benchmarking. Its purpose is to thoroughly assess all available information and evidence provided by the country. If any additional details are needed, the country is to be informed accordingly. At this stage, the co-assessors split the tasks among themselves to ensure coverage of all sub-indicators and related evaluations. Additionally, a list of questions can be prepared and shared with the NRA. In the case of remote benchmarking, this is the time to decide and communicate to the NRA regarding the number of breakout rooms which will be required during the assessment. This communication is facilitated through the team leader. Once the team reaches the country of assessment, an on-site preparatory meeting takes place involving the team leader and all team members. The meeting is generally held the day before benchmarking, with the purpose of reviewing the program and providing team members with updated information, agenda, and schedules. You already know by now that for remote benchmarking, this on-site preparatory meeting is replaced with virtual briefings. It is essential that your travel schedules are arranged to ensure your arrival a day before the benchmarking activity, allowing you to participate in this meeting. The formal opening meeting is conducted in the first half of the day of the benchmarking. The meeting can involve representatives from the Ministry of Health, the NRA, affiliated institutions, partners, and the entire WHO team. The purpose of this meeting is to provide you with an introduction to the national regulatory system and individual functions. NRA representatives deliver presentations, while the WHO team leader outlines the objectives and expected outcomes, introduces team members, presents the benchmarking agenda, and clarifies responsibilities. During the meeting, you are expected to actively listen and pay close attention to the presentations on all functions, as important information impacting the function you are going to assess may be provided. Upon conclusion of the opening meeting, the WHO team will split to initiate the interviews of NRA representatives on different functions. Let's now look at some differences in the conduction of the in-person and the remote formal benchmarking. During the in-person benchmarking process, both team members and NRA representatives are present. This phase typically spans over 2.5 to 3 days. The main objective of the process is the independent assessments of different functions to verify adherence to the requirements. This happens in parallel since all functions will be assessed by different assessors during the same timeframe. Your tasks in this phase include conducting the benchmarking process, collecting relevant evidence to support findings, and populating the benchmarking tool. Remote benchmarking is different from in-person benchmarking. the total time dedicated to interviews is shorter. In remote benchmarking, it typically spans 1.5 days, whereas it takes 2.5 to 3 full days for in-person mode. The objective of benchmarking is the same, as well as the assessor's tasks, but the independent assessment is conducted sequentially for different functions, so the overall time of the formal benchmarking is prolonged to 2 weeks instead of 1. Daily meetings are held during both in-person and remote formal benchmarking, each day at the end of the audit session, and are restricted to the WHO team leader and team members. Daily meetings are necessary for both in-person and remote benchmarking. The purpose of these meetings is to share common understandings, address any concerns that need further investigation, identify cross-cutting issues, and make necessary adjustments to the agenda. During these meetings, critical issues and potentially cross-cutting concerns should be shared among the team members. It is extremely important to attend these meetings, as this ensures a harmonized benchmarking approach. Also, in the case of remote benchmarking, and even if one's own function has not been assessed yet, you are requested to attend the daily meetings. At the end of the assessment phase, an internal wrap-up session is conducted during both in-person and remote formal benchmarking. This session involves the WHO team leader and team members. In the in-person mode, the wrap-up session takes place on the 4th day of the mission. The purpose of this session is to reach an agreement on the first draft benchmarking report, which includes common findings, major issues, strengths, and other relevant information. During this session, the team finalizes the compilation of the CGBT, which includes the executive summary and institutional development plans. In remote benchmarking, this wrap-up session takes place on the 8th and 9th half-days, and the overall duration is similar to the one conducted in the in-person mode. Two types of meetings are finally foreseen to provide feedback on the benchmarking to the NRA: a technical debriefing and a formal closing meeting. The technical debriefing session is arranged during the in-person benchmarking. This session involves the WHO team, officials from the NRA, and affiliated institutions. The technical debriefing is scheduled on the 4th day of the on-site visit, and its purpose is to provide detailed feedback on observations and areas of improvement before presenting them to a larger audience. During the session, all assessors present motivate and support their findings in detail. This is the time to provide additional clarifications if needed or requested by the NRA representatives, and it also offers an opportunity to address any disagreements. It's important to note that no similar debriefing session is generally conducted in remote benchmarking. The formal closing meeting marks the conclusion of both in-person and remote formal benchmarking. This meeting involves high-ranking officers, key personnel, and top management from the NRA and affiliated institutions, along with the WHO team. The formal closing meeting takes place on the last day of the mission, which is either the 5th day for in-person benchmarking or the 10th day for remote benchmarking. During this meeting, the WHO team leader presents the high-level results of the mission, including the maturity level reached and the proposed steps to be taken. In remote benchmarking, the meeting may be followed by more detailed technical feedback. During this meeting, team members may be requested to summarize and present their findings, highlighting both strengths and areas for improvement. They may also respond to questions for clarification. As a conclusive step of the benchmarking, the team leader takes responsibility for merging assessors' inputs and uploading the first draft report on SharePoint. As you have seen, There are some notable differences and complexities between remote and face-to-face benchmarking, along with associated risks. Besides the fact that communication in virtual mode can be less efficient than in person, and that document review can be more complex and time-consuming, the most impactful difference is related to the reduced time dedicated to each function in remote assessment. Although the overall engagement time for both the WHO team and the NRA is similar, with 1 week of full days for remote benchmarking compared to 2 weeks of half days for face-to-face benchmarking, nevertheless. The interviews during remote benchmarking are conducted over 1.5 days per function, while face-to-face benchmarking allows for almost 3 days per function. To overcome this time constraint in the case of remote benchmarking, thorough preparation in advance is more critical to avoid the need for additional unplanned meetings with NRAs. Additionally, the quality of NRA input becomes more important. More examples and exhaustive evidence are advisable to compensate for the limitations of remote assessment methods. Effective time management during interviews becomes essential in remote benchmarking. Discussions should be focused solely on strictly necessary topics, and reading full documents should be deferred. Driving the discussion and avoiding lengthy and overly general presentations becomes vital. You have reached the end of the module. It's time now for a short activity to test your understanding of the concepts covered in the module.